My mother wrote in my 6th grade autograph book, not even Dear Ina, she wrote, "You have nothing to fear but fear itself." Signed, and she wrote this, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. She wasn't a mushy mother. She was beautiful and talented, and she had hands and knife skills and craftsman skills that everyone loved. If I asked for an apple, and she had a cantaloupe and also an apple, she would carve that cantaloupe into a goose, even if I was lying on the floor salivating, asking for fruit. And if she only had the apple, she would use her knife skills to make it into one of those extraordinary swans. I didn't inherit those skills. She's been dead since 1975. But 3 weeks before New Year's 2005, I resurrected her. I had just completed a novel that took 4 years. And I had gone to the post office to mail it to my agent. On the way home from the post office, my hands froze on the wheel, and my heart began to race at a beat that, while I kind of knew as a over-researcher, overly analytical person, was probably not a heart attack at that age, but it sure felt like a heart attack. And other cars became menacing to me. Menacing. I thought, that one's going to hit me. Oh, I'm going to hit that one. I got myself right home, and I felt normal again. I couldn't get behind the wheel or on open highways or bridges for weeks. I was unsure of myself. A friend recommended, after I confided how terrifying this was for me, she recommended a psychiatrist, one that worked, she said, fast. When you get into a certain age group, do you want to reconstruct your life and then die? You don't want to do that. That's like shitty. And your insurance and all the co-pays, that's going to take your everything. You just want to say, this is what I think is wrong with me, blah, 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 blah. And she said, maybe 90 minutes, bingo, bango. Unfortunately, he was a chief of psychopharmacology at a hospital a little bit. I had to drive, which wasn't fun. So I arrived there, and he had a very big office. And I have learned now that the bigger the office and the more impressive the Oriental rug, the bigger the bill. And he looked exactly like Mick Jagger, younger. But in 2 minutes, or actually 15, he said, "I know exactly what to do for you." And he did a couple of things that made me feel very confident. And I left his office with 2 prescriptions. One for every day, and the other when he said, "If you can't sleep, take this." And I said, "Excuse me, but I'm sleeping now." "That's so good," he said. On the first 3 days of these meds, I felt sunshine breaking through. I drove down 2 exits of the Merritt Parkway on my own without being scared. And I turned around at that connector on Route 7 without being scared. Something's not right about that. But it didn't matter. I felt marvelous. And you know what? I was losing weight. I was thinner. My old cocktail dresses fit. I slept for about 1 hour a night. But I felt so good. I could put on the dresses, I could zip them up. I didn't have to hold my stomach in. All of the ones that I had been saving. And by now, my jewelry looked good with those. I had always been a fan of do-it-yourself shows. Even though I have no hand-eye coordination. If Tom has worked with me, if you see me work, I have something called dysgraphia. I can't line anything up. If you are supposed to measure once, or measure twice and cut once, I have measured 15 times, cut 3 times, and still have to throw everything away. So I was in the kitchen, and I was preparing food. Norm Abrams was creating a curlicute bracket for a Victorian porch. I've longed to have the Victorian porch that was torn down from our house when we added an office put back. I've asked my husband so many times, can't we do this together? Now, he is a dentist, and he is very good with small things, and he's pretty good with larger things. But the way we work together in our styles, and the fact that when we say we want to paint the room white, even that is a discussion until we both put up the same white, and that's what we're talking about. He said, I don't think that's going to work for us. But I was watching Norm Abrams, and I felt confident and beautiful. 30 minutes later, I found myself at Home Depot, coatless, no pantyhose, and wearing extraordinary cocktail dress. And I had started to wear them every morning. Different cocktail dresses because they fit and they made me cheerful and I could zip them up. And I went immediately to the salesman in the saw department. I wasn't afraid to try. I got there in Fairfield. He doesn't look at me like I'm unusually dressed. He's showing me everything. And I'm envisioning, tracing these Norm Abrams designs and using my hands and cutting them for a porch. And I have an out-of-body experience. What am I doing here? Kind of a good out-of-body experience at that particular moment. And I hope I have the other page here, but I do remember what happened. It was December 31st, 2004. And we have always had cocktails and caviar with friends who are difficult for other people, very serious friends. And the man had been our family physician, but they were coming that night, and my dress was a black velvet dress, the one I wore to Home Depot, with slippy sandals, no pantyhose. I used makeup on the one varicosity that I have, because I have better legs than anything else, than height. I actually have decent hair, but everything in between shows its age. So I had said, you don't need this. So I'm in the kitchen in the same dress. I feel safe, I'm home. I don't even think about what I have just done. My husband comes in and I say, I tell him, here's the caviar, here's the toasts, and I haven't slept in 3 weeks. But he hasn't said anything, because I say to him, don't worry, and I am behaving marvelously. What husband doesn't want you to behave marvelously? I'm like flitting through the house, I'm singing, I'm in cocktail dresses, I'm wearing dangling jewelry. I'm like, perfect, except for my height, but I'm perfect. And we are standing in the kitchen, and he says to me, his back is to me, he's mincing the little onions that you put in a little dish for caviar. And I am on the other side of the kitchen, his back is to me, we have 2 sinks, 2 chopping boards, we work very well together. And he says, you haven't been sleeping. I say to him, his back is still to me. I went to Home Depot today to buy a radial saw. His reaction, without a reaction, I will never forget. His shoulder twitched in a way that wasn't like you dislocated, but it was like I saw it. And he turned around and he said to me, "You need to call a doctor." And the look on his face was not as bad as the shoulder twitch. He was like twitching in terror. And I said, okay. So the evening happened with our friends coming over, and the friend was our family physician, who had for 30 some odd, at that time maybe 20 some odd years, been coming every New Year's just to have champagne and caviar. And he was our family physician. So when he walked in the door, I said to him, "I have been on this drug, and I feel like I can walk on water." And he said to me, "Get off the drugs. You are having a subacute bipolar attack." All artists are on a small spectrum of bipolar because during caveman days, who was going to invent the wheel? The ones who fell asleep or the ones who bathed at the moon? You are one who bathes at the moon, and it's on a spectrum. Don't label it. Get off the drugs. You can't walk on water. You probably can't use a radial saw. But if you set your mind to it, maybe you could. Is that what you want to do? And I said at that moment, "Can I have a drink?" He said, "You can have a drink tonight." And he said, "But you need to see a real therapist." What was the novel you just wrote about? I did go to see a real therapist, and she asked me the same thing. And I told her, it's about a woman who sends a postcard to a boyfriend that was hers when she was 16 years old. And she said, "That's what it's about." She said, "Listen, I don't ask my artist patients to show me their works." And she treats a lot of artists. But in this case, because you had just completed a novel when this all began, can you please show that to me? And I showed it to her. And when I came back for the third visit, she said, "So the author created an agoraphobic mother, and you immediately became an agoraphobic. Can we now begin?"